Welcome to the deep dive. You send us your sources, and our mission today is to really dig in and pull out the key insights, the fascinating bits, about a piece you highlighted, Piero della Francesca's Flagellation of Christ.
Exactly. We're going to unpack this painting using your materials to look at its history, its style, the composition, and all those different interpretations that have cropped up over the years. It really is a fascinating, slightly baffling work.
It absolutely is baffling. You know, it's kept art historians talking for ages, and I think as we get into it, you'll see why. It's just packed with potential meaning, and let's face it, a good amount of mystery.
Definitely.
And our guide here is Piero della Francesca himself, born around, 1415 in San Sepolcro? He wasn't just a painter.
No, not at all. He was a true Renaissance man.
Right. He had this amazing blend of artistic talent and serious mathematical skill. He even wrote books like De Perspectiva Pingendi, basically a manual on perspective for artists.
A foundational text.
So this wasn't just slapping paint on wood. This was a deep thinker working for really important patrons across Italy. So yeah, let's unpack this flagellation.
Absolutely. And, it's key to remember that for Piero, the math wasn't separate from the art. It was integral. That understanding of perspective, of proportion, it's how he builds the scene, how he guides your eye, and maybe even how he embeds meaning. So where do we start? The basics.
Let's do that. The fundamentals. So your sources generally place the Flagellation of Christ around 1455 to 1460, though some argue for a bit later, maybe 1468-70.
Right. There's always a bit of debate with dating these things.
It's oil and tempera on a wood panel, and here's something that might surprise you. It's pretty small.
Yeah, isn't it? Like 58 by 81 centimeters, not exactly a huge altarpiece.
No, and you can see it today in Urbino at the Galleria Nazionale del Marché, which brings up the question of who actually paid for it.
Exactly. The name Federico da Montefeltro, the Duke of Urbino, comes up a lot.
Makes sense given where it ended up.
It does. But, as your sources probably mentioned, there's no definitive proof of the commission. It's still uncertain.
And that uncertainty, that unknown element, just adds to the whole enigma, doesn't it?
It really does. It fuels the speculation.
Okay, so we have a time frame, a possible patron. Let's look at the painting itself. The composition is really striking, isn't it? It's not your standard Bible scene layout.
No, not at all. What's immediately obvious is how it's split, almost in two.
Yeah.
You've got these two distinct spaces. They're connected visually, by the perspective, definitely.
Right.
But they feel like different worlds happening at the same time.
Right. So on the left, you've got the actual flagellation, Christ tied to a column, inside this very classical-looking building. You see the tormentors, maybe Pilate watching. It's enclosed, intense.
And then, bam, on the right side foreground, outside, you have these three guys, richly dressed, just talking.
Chatting.
Yeah, seemingly completely oblivious to the brutality happening right behind them. It's that contrast, that juxtaposition that hits you straight away.
And binding it all together, visually at least, is Piero's incredible use of perspective. Your sources must highlight this.
Oh, absolutely. Linear perspective.
Those lines on the floor tiles, they all converge, drawing your eye right back.
Right to Christ's head. That's the vanishing point. All the spatial logic leads there. It's technically brilliant, but also, deeply meaningful in focus.
And the architecture itself is worth noting. In that flagellation scene, you've got columns, pilasters, those flat columns.
Right. And the entablature, the beam on top, very Renaissance, very classical.
But some sources also mention maybe some Eastern touches, little details that hint at something else.
Yeah, possibly. It adds another layer. And then there's that statue on top of the column Christ is tied to.
Oh, yeah, the golden statue. What's the thinking there? A pagan idol?
Often interpreted that way, yeah. Maybe Apollo or Sol Invictus. It sets up this clear contrast between paganism and Christ's suffering.
And that ceiling, the coffered ceiling inside, it really shows off his perspective skills, creating the sense of deep space on a flat panel.
Definitely. All these architectural bits, they create this feeling of rationality, of order, even surrounding this incredibly violent act. It's very Piero.
That blend of intellectual control and, intense subject matter.
Exactly. That's his signature, really.
Okay, what about light and color? Because that also feels very distinct. It's not like, say, Caravaggio with dramatic shadows.
No, completely different. The light here is clear, almost unnaturally, even across the whole painting, both inside and out.
Like a perfect still day.
Kind of, yeah. But almost supernatural in its clarity. It doesn't create drama with shadow. It just illuminates everything very evenly. You see every detail.
And the colors contribute to that harmony too, right? Your sources probably talk about the palette.
Uh-huh. It's harmonious, quite contained.
Yes.
Soft ochres, lovely blues, some reds, golds, applied in these very flat, defined areas.
It reinforces that sense of clarity, of order we were talking about.
It does. And look at the blue of the sky through the columns inside.
Oh yeah, it's really intense.
It adds such depth back there, and it contrasts beautifully with the warmer tones of the building and figures. It's a small thing, but it really anchors the space visually.
All right, so we have the scene set visually, but now we have to tackle the big question, the elephant in the room, or rather the three figures on the right.
The central mystery.
Who are they, and why do they seem so indifferent? It's chilling.
And this is where, the interpretations just explode. It's why the painting is still debated so fiercely. Your sources would have laid out several main theories.
Okay, let's walk through some. There's the conventional view from Urbino itself.
That's one of the older ones. It suggests the figures are Od Antonio de Montefeltro, the Duke, between two of his advisors, Manfredo de Pio and Tommaso di Guido dell'Agnello.
And the connection is?
The idea is that their murders, Od Antonio and the advisors were assassinated, were seen as unjust, mirroring Christ's innocent suffering, who may be commissioned by Federico, Od Antonio's successor.
Okay. But there are problems with that theory.
There are some historical inconsistencies, questions about Federico's own role after the murders. It's not a perfect fit for many scholars now.
Then there's a dynastic idea.
Yeah.
That they're Federico's predecessors.
Right, maybe his father Guido Antonio. Though one source you sent might mention an old inventory that mistakenly names Duke Guidobaldo.
Who was Federico's son born way later.
Exactly, so chronological problems there too. These earlier theories really tried to tie it directly to the Urbino family, but the evidence is a bit thin.
Which pushes people towards more symbolic readings.
Precisely. And that leads us to some really fascinating complex interpretations, like Carlo Ginzburg's.
The political theological one, this one broadens the scope massively, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Ginzburg suggests the seated figure on the left, observing the flagellation, isn't Pilate, but the Byzantine Emperor John VIII Palaiologos.
Identifiable by his hat.
Supposedly, yes, that distinctive red hat. And in this reading, Christ isn't just Christ. He represents the suffering of Constantinople after it fell to the Turks in 1453.
Wow. So the whole painting becomes an allegory for the fall of Byzantium and the crisis in Christendom.
That's the idea. And the three men on the right, they become figures involved in attempts at unifying Christianity against the Ottomans or dealing with the fallout. Cardinal Bessarion is often mentioned in this context.
So it shifts from local politics to this huge geopolitical event. That's quite a leap for a small painting. Kenneth Clark had similar ideas too, didn't he? Seeing the bearded figure as a Greek scholar, the whole an allegory of the church's suffering.
Yes, that whole line of interpretation really emphasizes the historical backdrop. The fall of Constantinople was a massive shock. It's plausible Piero was reflecting on that trauma, that uncertainty.
Okay, now for a completely different angle. Marilyn Ehrenberg Levin's theory. This one is much more personal, right?
Much more. Levin suggests the figures on the right are portraits. Ludovico Gonzaga, the Marquis of Mantua, his friend, the astrologer Ottaviano Baldini della Carta. And, crucially, the youth in the center represents their deceased sons.
Oh, wow. So it's about personal grief.
Exactly. Connecting their private loss to the suffering of Christ. Lavin even argues the perspective works perfectly if you imagine someone kneeling in Ottaviano's private chapel, where she thinks it was intended to hang.
That makes it incredibly intimate, a sort of private devotional piece wrapped in this public-looking scene.
It's a compelling reading. It reminds us that art history isn't always about grand politics. Sometimes it's about deep personal experience.
Then there's David King's interpretation, linking it to science.
Yeah, the scientific and biographical view. This one is intricate. It connects the painting to an inscription, an acrostic, on an astrolabe given to Cardinal Bessarion.
An astrolabe, okay.
King suggests the figures might have multiple identities, linked to Bessarion's intellectual circle. Maybe even the famous astronomer Regiomontanus is depicted. It might even refer to the fall of Trebizond, another Byzantine loss.
So it could be a kind of intellectual puzzle encoded with references only insiders would get.
Possibly. It really highlights how art, science, and patronage were all tangled up together in the Renaissance. Very intriguing stuff.
And just to cover all bases, John Pope Hennessy threw another idea out there.
Right, completely different again. He suggested it's not the flagellation of Christ at all, but the dream of St. Jerome.
where Jerome dreamt he was being punished, flayed, for reading pagan books.
Exactly. Pope Hennessy pointed to an older Sienese painting of that subject as a possible source. It just shows we shouldn't always assume the title tells the whole story.
It's just amazing. One small panel, so many competing ideas. It really speaks volumes about the painting's density, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We might never know the one answer, or maybe there isn't just one. But exploring these theories tells us so much about the painting, the period, and how people connect with art. It certainly gives you a sense of the rich intellectual world Piero inhabited.
So, okay, we've wrestled with the meaning. Let's step back and look at how he painted it. The style, the technique, what really stands out.
Well, we have to come back to the perspective. It's just fundamental.
Masterful control of space.
Totally. But it's not just technique for its own sake. It structures everything, how you experience the scene.
And the figures themselves have that stillness, that monumentality. Your sources might call them sculptural.
Yeah, they feel solid, permanent, almost timeless. Their faces are often quite reserved, enigmatic even. It adds to that calm, contemplative mood that runs through so much of his work.
Despite the violence depicted.
Right. And the way he applies the paint, it's so precise. Fine, even brush strokes. The surfaces are incredibly smooth, luminous. Meticulous is the word.
And there's talk of mathematical principles beyond perspective, like the golden section may be influencing the proportions.
It's possible, yeah. That sense of underlying mathematical harmony, that ideal balance. It feels like it's there, underpinning the composition.
So it's this combination, the mathematical rigor, the serene atmosphere, the light, the color, the careful composition. That's the Piero effect.
I think so. It's that unique blend of cool intellectualism and profound, quiet beauty. Really quite unlike anyone else.
So bringing this deep dive towards a close, what's the takeaway? Why does this painting still matter so much? Why is it considered such a landmark?
Well, I think your sources all agree it's an absolute masterpiece, but also deeply enigmatic. It's that unique synthesis we keep talking about. Art, theology, mathematics, all coming together.
A real product of the Renaissance mind.
Exactly. It perfectly captures that moment's intellectual energy, and its influence stretches far beyond its time, doesn't it?
Yeah, from his contemporaries right up to modern artists. People keep coming back to it.
They do. And Kenneth Clark wasn't wrong when he called it the greatest small painting in the world.
High praise.
But it earns it, I think, because despite its size, it grapples with huge themes.
Yeah.
Suffering, innocence, power, indifference, the sacred versus the secular, the past versus the present. It just keeps making you think.
It really does. So,
Yeah.
okay, we've journeyed into this painting, the context, the technique, the sheer puzzle of its meaning, the many interpretations, and hopefully gained a clear picture of Piero della Francesca himself, this artist-mathematician.
Indeed. And maybe for you, our listener, reflecting on all these different ideas, the political readings, the personal grief, the scientific codes, the biblical scene, the dream, what resonates most? What do you think Piero is inviting you to consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. And does that mathematical precision, that cool logic, does it make the scene more emotionally powerful for you, or does it create a kind of distance, something to mull over?
Definitely. It's a painting that keeps asking questions. We'd encourage everyone listening to look closer at Piero's work and keep exploring the discussions around this incredible painting. There's always more to discover.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into the flagellation.